Here we are again. We're going to take apart this Poljot 17 joule, find out what's wrong with that date mechanism. I got the back retaining ring already loose, and we're going to find out what's going on here. Okay, first thing we're going to do is let that mainspring down. It is still running, it's still wound up. Let's give that a quick let down. There you go, that's in the shot. Not great, but hey, it's in the shot. There we go. The stem's going to come out like every other. Pull it into the hand setting position. Press on the button. Out it comes. Slick, beautiful. Alright, this is held in with two, there's a retainer, Geister keeper I call them. Don't know the technical term. Probably never will, because it doesn't matter. Alright, out they come. I might have this microscope up a little close. I might have to readjust. So if you see things moving around, that's me readjusting. This should be a fairly quick tear down. After this, it'll go into the, I got a new ultrasonic cleaner. We'll put the case in first, get that cleaned up in just a mild detergent, and then we'll do the rest of the parts in a professional grade cleaner. So there's our dial. There you go. Smart. There's our crystal encase. Let's zoom out. You can really get a look at that crystal. That's a mess. That's okay. It'll clean up. It'll look pretty good. The case itself, you can see it's rather dirty. The ultrasonic cleaner should do fairly quick work of that. And I think it'll be a nice piece. I think Lenny's going to be happy. I hope so. I'm pretty sure he will. So we have this ring, this spacer ring that's on there. We're going to leave that on there for now. Why? Just because it seems to be a good spot to start to disassemble this. I'm going to put the stem back in so we don't lose any of those parts when we take it apart. I'd like to line all these up. There we go. And if you notice, let's do this real quick. Let's get in real tight. That tail end of the hour hand. Let's see if I can move that hour hand. Tail end of that hour hand has been dragging on the dial. See the wear marks? So whoever put this together seated that hour hand a little too deeply, and there you have that wear mark. So that's nothing we can avoid. However, we don't have to seat it that deeply. You can see how close it is right there. Perhaps it was a loose fit on the gear that goes on there. I'll check that as I go, and if I have to replace it, I have a replacement part for it. I'm almost positive I do. I got about 3 or 4 of these laying around that are just that. So let's line up the hands to make them easy to remove. Pretty straightforward stuff here. If you've seen any of my other videos, it's pretty straightforward, easy stuff. That came off rather nicely. There's the minute hand. Now this hour hand might need a little finessing. It is very deeply seated on that. You can see I'm not going to get anything under that without causing possible damage to the dial. So we're gonna use a little finesse. I have two screwdrivers that are very fine that I use for removing hairsprings from balances, and I sharpen them real steep so I can get under there. Let's get a focus shot. I can get under that, and we're going to nudge this little by little to reduce any chance of damage to the dial. And we're not going to do much with this dial. We're just going to hit it with some Rodico. That is all. Of course, my phone is ringing. I got to see who that is. Guess it doesn't matter. Come on. Okay, had to get rid of the phone. I don't need any disturbances because I'm not about to edit anything here. So we're going to just get under here with that blade. We're going to nudge it a little bit at a time. We're going to do one side, then we're going to do the other. You can see it's fairly loose. It's coming up fairly quickly, too quickly. So I think we're going to tighten that or change that gear, whatever we need to do. We'll figure this out. No worries there. And it looks like at one time these hands were painted with something on the back. Here's something interesting. That one's black on the back side, and this one is white on the back side. Maybe that's loom paint. Whatever it was, they were changed out at one time because they are not identical. I'll let Lenny decide if he wants to keep those two or possibly get replacements. I don't know. We're going to let him worry about that. So here we have the dial, and because we took the keeper rings off, this just slips right off of there. Nothing extraordinary about that. Here's our dial feet attaching screws. There's one. That came in focus pretty quick. I'm going to loosen that. You know, once we get this dial off, we'll get to see that date changing mechanism. Get a quick look at that. See what's doing. Okay. Just backing those screws out a little more. And we have to nudge this dial just a bit. I'm just getting in here with a blade, prying that open a little bit. There seems to be a little stickiness in the dial. Feet, that's not uncommon. And just work it back and forth, one to the other, ease it out. If you can see where I'm doing that, right in here. I'm just working that in there. Going from one side to the other. It might be a little tight. Let's get back in the shot. Okay. And eventually it'll just work its way loose. And there we have the back side of the dial. The feet are intact. Looks good. Looks like we've got some staining on here. Could be that staining was from water infiltration. I don't know. It does have a sheen to it, so there's a bit of oil on there as well. Okay, here's our mechanism, and from here we can find out what's going on with our date. And let's point out some things first. Down here at the 18 mark, this little piece here should be spring loaded. It is. That kind of locks it into place when it snaps over. And here's our mechanism for changing the date. If you've saw my other video, that shows how that system works. One other thing, look at the plate there. See if I can get that to come up. That glossy shine, that sheen, that's oil. There's quite a bit of oil on this movement. I would say too much, a little bit too much oil. That could be why that hour hand was very loose. It got lubrication on that wheel, and this thing's been over oiled. I don't know anything about the history of it. I'm sure Lenny doesn't either. So this mechanism here is what operates the date jump, the date jumper. Is that what you call that? So let's see what happens here. We're pretty close to the midnight hour. Let's put this in a holder. Let's make this easy. So we can hold on to this in a holder. Okay. Going to back this up a little bit. Alright, let's see. Why does this not click over? There it is, winding up to midnight. And it's engaging there at the 31. And it's trying to pull it and let it go, but it doesn't seem to. So could be something's binding this up. And if you notice, the jumper over here hasn't moved. Is that spring too tight? Is something bound up? We don't know. Doesn't feel too tight. So whatever's going on, you can see that pawl, I guess you would call it a pawl, a lever, is not allowing this to engage and disengage. This could have been this way from the last service. We don't know. We don't know what's going on. I'm going to wind this back and release that a little bit. Now that wheel, that date ring, that thing should spin very freely, loose. I have to put a little force on that to get that to click over. I think that's our problem. I don't think we have any broken parts because everything seems to be intact. This wheel should just very easily click over. Here's that little click to engage it. That spring feels normal, but this is seems tight. Okay, now it's loosening up. So maybe we have a warped ring. Who knows? Who knows? So let's continue. One thing to note, the back side of this should have no lubrication on it. These need to be very dry. They don't have to have lubrication. The lubrication will actually cause friction. Not friction from the oil, but friction from the viscosity of the oil. Because these are very small parts, they don't need lubrication. They can just rest in there. Okay, that is not an original screw. That screw looks a little banged up at one time, or has been banged up at one time. This video might take a little bit of time just because I'm explaining things for Lenny as things go along here. Okay. And we're going to go easy on this plate. Take this plate off easy so we don't lose any springs that might pop out of there. Okay. It's a little tight. That's unusual. That plate shouldn't be that tight. It is pinned. Okay. That's a good sign. There's a pin here, an alignment pin, and there's one over here. I don't want to put pressure. There we go. I don't want to put pressure any pressure on the date ring. Okay. I think what we need to do is take a look at everything, and if everything looks good, find out where that binding is occurring. Here's our plate, and then proceed from there. So that spring is going to take off on that lever if I don't do something about it. So let's take the energy out of that, as we like to say, or as I like to say. Okay, spring and lever, click. I don't know what it's called. You should know that by now. I don't know these terms. This spring is crimped in, and this lever is just kind of laying in there. I want to keep a finger on it. Here's the back side of that. Let's get it in the shot. Here's the back side of that. I just dropped the lever. That's okay. Didn't go far. I just dropped it. Here's the lever. That's out. So all the components are intact. My concern is, why is this tight? And if you notice, let's get a shot of that. I don't know if this is the problem or if this is causing it. Whether or not this was intentional, I don't know. There's lubrication on this. See that boss? That's the date ring rides right on top of that. See that sheen? That's oil. That does not need to be oiled. It's got quite a bit of it. It goes all the way around. Was that intentional, or was it spillover from other components? We don't know. What we do know is all the components are here for this mechanism to work. As long as it's installed properly, you can see the back end of the date wheel, date ring wheel, whatever you call it. It's got a gloss of oil on it as well. That oil can really slow things down. I know it sounds odd that oil would slow things down, but at this scale it doesn't require oil. It doesn't appear to be warped. I thought maybe it was warped and acting up, binding in certain spots, but I don't think so. I think what we need is just what it needs, a service. Clean everything, oil it sparingly where it needs to be, and before we put it together, we're going to do a dry run, a test run of everything. Not dry, I shouldn't say dry. You know, before we button everything up, we're going to test it and make sure everything's working. This wheel that the hour hand goes on to should lift right off. Lift off, no problem. I did notice, okay, here's a problem. I do notice when I wind this to set the time, let's get a better shot here. It's very tight to set the time. It's not real smooth and slick. It's got some tightness to it. That has me concerned. And the fact that that gear that the hour hand attaches to doesn't come off, that should just pop right off. That's a slick fit. See that gear? Let's point this gear out before I do anything. That gear right there. Look at all the movement in there. Well, I got a serious amount of movement there. So when I go to set the time, whatever tightness is encountered has wore out that axle post, let's call it. That gear should not be rocking back and forth like that. Now, I can set the time, but it's tight, it's binding up. And I think it's binding up because of that wear. It's wore that thing down. Once we get this off, we'll get a closer look at it. That is not normal. And if that's the case, I believe that is part of the watch base movement. Okay, now we got to get this off. That should just lift right off. And I'm leaning on these tweezers pretty good to get that off of there. I'm surprised how tight that was. It should not be that tight. It did come off. It seems very dry. There's no lubrication in there whatsoever. So it looks like things were lubricated okay on one end, too much on another, and not at all. I'm just looking at this through the loop. I'm inspecting that gear. And let's get this guy out and reveal. Let's do the reveal of what's going on here. So I honestly think this isn't working right because of the maintenance it did receive. Well, probably well-intentioned. Hey, there's an old saying in the car business, Moore's Law. Who's Moore? Franklin Moore? I don't know, but Moore's Law was, if what you have is good, more is better. Look at all that gunk buildup on that. So maybe this person thought, well, if a little bit of oil is good, more has to be better. Okay, let's get a look on that. And you can see there's quite a bit of buildup of dirt. Looks like a grease buildup. These gears really do not require oil on the teeth itself, just on the pivots. They can run dry. So let's move this out of the way. So this post, and here's the problem, all that wearing away of this post, let's get a tight shot of that. Wearing away of that post, my computer is acting up. The wearing away of that post has this this grit going throughout. There's that post. Maybe I need to freehand that post. Let's get these gears off first. I'm getting ahead of myself. Like I said, a well-intentioned service that's that tall gear that may have been, you know, well-intentioned, but, you know, do we need all this oil and lubrication? No. No, we do not. If there's pressure on this pivot, there's going to be pressure on this, there's going to be pressure on that. Consequently, there may be pressure on that cannon pinion. Who knows? So, I don't know if I can get in tight on that post. Tight enough. That post is wore out. And that is causing all that gunk buildup. And if you notice, it's right in here as well. Right in here. That's got some wear on it. I'm going to take a look at this with the loop. It's pretty dirty. That post is half gone. I'm going to have to try to get a better close-up of that. That post is wore out to the point it is 50% of it is gone, and the wear is from this. Of course, you can't see it without focusing, dummy. There we go. Alright, genius. Now you're focused. 50% of that post is wore out, and it's from this side. See how that's kind of like rounded at the base, but at the top it's got a different radius? That is wore out completely, and it's the case. That's the problem. It's part of the case. This is showing wear as well. So we're going to end this right now because we're getting into 25 minutes. The fact that this was ticking away nicely lets me to believe the regular train on this is fine. The balance is fine. The hairspring. And I think what we have here, we're going to expect end play and end shake and all the pivot points as we go to the next video, but everything is intact. I just think we are wore out here on that post. It's going to be a problem if we assemble this again. It's just going to do the same thing. I'll contact Lenny and we'll figure something out, and we'll go from there. I'm sure he would want this to run as nicely as possible because he's going to hand it down to his children. Maybe, maybe not. I don't know, but you'll wait and see.